I'm the executive director of the Winter Foundation for Poetry, and we administer one of our programs is the Santa Fe Youth Poet Laureate Program. And along with our partner, the National Youth Poet Laureate Program, we celebrate our nation's top youth poets who are committed to artistic excellence and civic engagement, and who are using their voices to inspire change. We're in our 7th year of the program, and we were just awarded the Mayor's Arts Award for Arts Education. That honor. Since inception, more than 150 students from Santa Fe, Albuquerque, the Navajo Nation, and Okeh have participated in the program. We draw from most schools across northern New Mexico, including New Mexico School for the Arts, the Master's Program, Capitol High School, ATC, Santa Fe Prep, just to name a few. And the program has really created a cohort of young poets who know each other, they perform together, and they support each other. So today, you have the distinct honor and pleasure of hearing from one of those exceptional poets, Maiya Brock.
Hi everyone, thank you Alex and Kelsey for those intros, and thank you to my wonderful friend Ada. That cello wasn't that amazing. My name is Maiya. I'm a poet, a writer, and a student at Maiya, and I am so honored to be here with you all today to talk a little bit about ritual and about what rituals I tend to use in my creative process and when writing and performing poetry, as well as tying in a little bit about being an introvert and being a performer. So I've divided this talk into 3 sections, because I'm a planner like that. And the first section, each section is going to be a different topic, and then a poem will be following that is related to that topic in some way. So this first section is about rituals, the theme of this month, the Creative Mornings. And rituals tie into creative process a lot for me. So I'll just go into a little bit, a few rituals that I have for writing and performing poetry. The first ritual that I have is I always check in with my emotions. Before I write a poem, and I sit down to write with the intention of writing a poem, I just check in for a second. And I say, what am I feeling right now? What emotions are rising to the surface? And I acknowledge those emotions and validate them. And that helps me channel those emotions through my heart and onto the page. And that is such an important ritual for me. The second ritual is more for performance. And you'll get to see this more as I perform these pieces. But I always take a second to ground myself. Because getting up there on stage is so nerve-wracking, it's scary, you know? And being able to take a second to just be in my body and just be here and remember why I'm here, to connect, to just take a breath, that's so important. So you'll see me do that later on. And the third ritual is a daily ritual that I have for writing. I, in the past, have struggled to find good writing prompts because I wanted to have a bit of writing done every day. And I wanted to follow a prompt every day. But I just couldn't find a book of prompts that called out to me. So I decided to write my own prompts. So I made 365 hard little prompts that were just totally 100% me. And I printed them out and cut them out and put them in a shoebox. And every day, I pull, up to this day, I'll do this tonight, I pull a single paper that has a prompt on it, and I respond to that prompt. And it's really funny because sometimes those prompts coincide with things that have happened or the emotions that are running high, which is really interesting. For example, last night when I was stressing a little bit about this performance, preparing for that, guess what prompt I got? It was write about feeling overwhelmed. It's not spinning. But yeah, these prompts really help me to every day just write a little bit, even if it's a sentence or a few words. You know, I'm not turning out masterpieces every time. It's just a little bit of writing every day. And that helps me build up this metaphorical writing muscle. So that's a really important daily ritual that I do. And let's lead into our first poem. So speaking of cutting up things and printing them out, I wrote a collection of poetry last year called Wildflower, which I wrote and named before Billie Eilish came out with her new song Wildflowers. This collection of poetry was so powerful, and it was some of my best work, I thought. And what it was missing was this powerful punch of an ending. I just couldn't figure out a good way to end it. And shout out to my mom, she had the idea to print out every poem I had written and cut it up into little bits. And so what I did is I reorganized these little pieces of the poems I'd already written, and I made a new poem out of it. And that was a ritual I did for about a week. I would just every day I would work on it for a little bit. I would reorganize these bits and pieces and sentences and fragments that maybe didn't make sense before, but then did. And it turned into this beautiful piece about wildflower, which is a metaphor for everything and for me. And it wrapped up the themes and patterns really well of the entire thing because it was made up of what had come before it. And something that was really interesting was that patterns emerged and words that were repeated throughout my poems that I hadn't really noticed, such as light and darkness, memory and dreams. Those were all themes that came up that I didn't realize until I had done this reorganization. And it was really interesting because those were the themes of the collection. And something else that I did was I made the end of that conclusion poem look like a wildflower visually on the page, which really added to that creative process and to that ritual. And so I will share that with you as we get to that part of the poem. So. This will work here.
You can just do this.
Right. So this first piece is called Wildflower. My first fish caught with the pole barely, a drawn bowstring going slack. When sitting next to her, I bloom awkwardly, smiling and thinking of our spirits we will be, a spacing moment of imperfection. Certain things are completely unexpected, 35 texts, blood from your mouth, tissues on the floor. You are the empty space, not full, half empty, the emptiness, the space. For the 100th time, the same question, can you blame, so I could sleep without, finding it was other hand and I, the source of your pain, broken and yet whole, what was missing, found. The phrase, but how could we? And you, sweet, exposed heart, you are strong, paying attention as we cannot shy away, pieces I've yet to discover, I guess, and no, fuck with, submerged. Our new language is something and perfume and the sound of a flower. My darling, I curve my fingers. Be sure to find the fingers of your poetry of this sort. My poetry, tired poetry is poems, the flame, I am the fire and the light bulb. That fire is me, fire and the light bulb, the fire. In a light bulb, light, darkness, the dark, the dark, the dark. I would not have noticed. Sometimes it's hard not to notice. Cry and dream, cry when, dreaming peacefully, I am dreaming, but not asleep, dreaming, dreaming. Memory, memories, memory, memory, remember, just remember, remember that, remember. My tears means my tears because repeating a pattern of speech. There are many places you deserve, the world. I like the impossible love story of the wildflower. Thank you. Okay, so for the second section, I'll be talking about the difference between performance and reading in terms of poetry. And you may think at first that they're synonymous, but there's actually a little bit of a difference. For any of you who have been to an open mic or a poetry reading or anything where the author reads what they have on the page, you'll know that reading is basically what it sounds like. It's when the author goes up and they have their piece in front of them and they read it. And that is a beautiful and powerful way to connect with other people as a writer and as a poet. Because you can be an artist and you can write these poems, but if you don't share them with other people, you're not getting that connection. So by sharing your poems and your writing of any sort with other people, you can really make that connection. And that's so important as an artist. And the world needs more connection, which is a part of why I'm here today, to connect with you all, to share with you my poems. And so there are both ways to connect performance and reading, but performance is sort of taking that to a new level. It's taking another step forward. Performance is more focusing on the way you say the words than the words themselves. So reading is just getting those words out, which is still so powerful, but performance is when you know those words by heart. There's where memorization comes in. And you know those words and you know that you can perform them well, and you focus on packing them full of emotion to present to the audience. And that is another layer of connection. And that's why I love performance so much. It's one of the reasons. And sometimes reading doesn't pack as much of a punch, but you can still, it's a great intro to being able to do performance poetry. And I had a lot of readings that I did that got me up to the level of being able to do performance poetry. So this second piece that I will be performing for you today, it's called Results. And it's the first piece I ever wrote with performance in mind, with the intention going into it that I would read this, or not read it, sorry, I would perform this as a poetry slam. Salt. Tired poetry is reaching for a notebook, pen in hand, draw a line, ink darker than the morning's night sky, eyes half closed, the sleepy feeling in the back of the head right behind the retinas, dreaming already and remembering the way it feels to be awake, to wake up and write, reaching for a notebook, pen in hand, draw a line. Tired poetry is life or death, pain or pride. I could write for hours about rain and sunlight because all topics are born from them, deviations with deviations, salt on salt. My exhausted mind is in the words underlined in red. You'll find me in the pages I wrote and I quote. I do not mean to erase, only to remember that there is more than pain or pride. This is life or death. Sometimes it's hard to write a poem without the pronoun her, scared dumb of missing what was in her mind. My eyes have pressed it over, my mind is blank as I draw a line. I don't want to forget, for now I'll write blindly and hope that with time, everything will be fine. She, her, the incomprehensible vastness of it all is my mental whiteout. I am a tomato triptych on solstice, fragmented into 3 whole pieces like being wholly in love. Too soon, not soon enough. Tired poetry is reaching for a notebook, heart in hand. The line has already been drawn. Thank you. Okay, this third section is about being an introvert. And you probably might have guessed by now, I'm an introvert. But I want to talk about the difference, or being an introvert and being a performer. Sometimes they're very different things, they're 2 very different sides. And I've struggled a lot as an introvert to feel like I can have my voice and voice my opinions and my thoughts in the world. Not even just in performance and talks, but in conversation and just being social in general. That's been something I've struggled with as a person, but also as a performer, because I used to think that if I wanted to go up and perform, if I wanted to go to a talk like this, I would have to push away my introvert. I would have to completely block it out to say, no, you're not an introvert today. You're just a performer. But that's not true. And as I've grown, and as I've grown not just as a person, but as a performer, I've realized that performing, you have to be true to yourself. And being true to myself, I am an introvert. That's who I am. I'm quiet by nature, but I'm also a performer by nature. It's probably because of my Leo rising. That's a bit different. But being a performer and being an introvert are two sides of the same coin. They are two things that are different but overlap to make me who I am and who I can be in performance. And that's something that's so, so important. And I've learned to, in performance, when I'm about to perform, I don't push away my introvert. I bring it with me on stage. Because I am an introvert. I am me. I'm an introvert and a performer. And instead of tapping into what I thought was my extroverted side and just being a performer, I tap into my heart instead. Because in my heart, I'm an introvert. And that helps me bring with me this quiet power. And that quiet power is something that I've had to find myself as a person and as a performer. And this next poem that I will be sharing with you is the piece that I wrote about my frustration in not feeling as a quiet person that I can voice my opinion and voice what needs to be said. And so, yeah. Quiet. I can't believe I once thought quiet meant silent. I can't believe I considered quiet as something to be fixed, something to be ashamed of, something so full of pain that I wrote poems of pity just so I could feel less insane. I can't believe how many times I let people walk over me, talk over me. I don't want to be impolite. I'm frightened that I might cross a line, but you're interrupting me just fine. And if you're not interrupting, you're ignoring. Nothing to say, she must be boring. Take your words and go. I don't want them. I want you to listen, but you're still talking, telling me, what are you doing? Speak up, don't you know? No one can hear you. I can't believe I believed that being quiet and being confident were two parallel lines that could never cross. I can't believe I ever got lost in a sea of speech. And if you practice what you preach, shut the fuck up for once and let me speak. I can't believe I presumed power was only for loud people, never settle down people, class clown people, mess around people, because that feeling of being powerless can drown people. And I've learned that the only way to stay afloat in this world is to reach out to people. Because we are all just people, quiet or loud on stage or in the crowd, and all of you should be proud of the way you sit up straight in your seat, of the way you put your feet on the ground. And now I believe that quiet is not something to be fixed. Now I believe that quiet and confident with practice can become the same line. Now I believe that quiet does not mean silent. Thank you so much for being here today.
All right, this extrovert's going to be very quiet over here. We're going to have a Q&A. So if anybody has questions for Maiya, please.
Is surprised when you performed a poem at the reaction you got, good or bad?
I have been told that the audience reacts a lot more than I'm aware of in a piece. So I'll be performing and I'm in my body, I'm not aware of people's reactions, but my parents have told me that after people are murmuring and like snapping fingers, whatever it is, but I've never been surprised by that because I'm aware of that during a performance. Thank you.
Good question. Other questions? Yeah, Mike.
Great. I'm just like blown away. Thank you so much. My only question for you is, what is your favorite word and why?
That's hard. Growing up, I always said it was cinnamon, but I don't know why.
Yes. Other interesting questions? Yes.
You talked a little bit about getting into the zone. What is your actual ritual for that? I saw you do it, but how did you come up with it, I guess?
Yeah.
Question.
How did I come up with it? That's a good question. I think I just kind of figured I needed to take a breath before every performance. It sort of came from this need to just take a breather and give myself a moment to just be here. But I think the more grounding aspect of it came from just performing and practicing and doing all these performances and realizing like, hey, I'm not in a rush. I can just step up here and just take a breath and just ground myself. And and clear my mind and allow my thoughts to just drift away and focus entirely on the poem. Thank you.
I needed to take a breath. Yeah.
Oh, just following up, like, I heard everyone in the room take a breath when you did. Taking that space is a gift to us also.
Yes, and
Your poetry and the way you present yourself is so wise and so, I feel, is ageless in a certain way, timeless. When did you realize that this is what you were meant to? I mean, if you put the age 16 to what you do, it doesn't make sense. It's kind of always known, or where did this come from?
That's a great question. I have always been a writer. Ever since I was little, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I loved writing little stories and little snippets of things. I didn't really get into poetry as much until I moved here, which was about 4 years ago. And then I think I discovered poetry and I realized that this is what I wanted to do. Because I want to be a writer, but I also want to be a poet, and both at the same time. And being a poet is really amazing for me because it gives me a chance to get my words out there and get my art into the world. And I think when I discovered that, that's why I made that connection, and that's why I was so excited to discover performance poetry. Thank you.
yeah.
Are there writers, poets that have influenced you that you feel very, very close to?
Many. I love Sierra DeMolder specifically from Button Poetry. I think she's amazing, and her chapbook, Ephemera, is one of my favorites. And I go to a school of the arts in Passaic down the road, and in the creative writing department, we do poetry as a department, or as in our grade level. So my class of junior creative writers, we're all doing poetry together and sharing that poetry with each other, and that's really important to me as to have influence and to be able to get inspiration from other poets that are my age.
Yeah, Hillary.
Maya, I know you're a knitter. How does knitting factor into your process?
Knitting gives me a lot of time to think. I think when I'm knitting, I can listen and also think at the same time. And it sort of gives my hands something to do. I'm not really sure how it would tie into performance poetry, but it definitely gives me time to think about what I could say, themes that I could bring in. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I feel like I should know this, but as an introvert and you're a writer, when was the first time that you actually got up to perform? And do you remember what that feeling was like?
The first time I believe I ever got up to perform was when I was a finalist for Winter Winner in 2021, I want to say. I was an 8th grader. I think that was the first time I ever really did a performance, like not just for my family, just like actually getting up on that stage and doing that. It was so nerve-wracking, but I'm so glad I did it.
Well, you were amazing then.
Thank you for giving her that opportunity to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a ritual for after you've done a performance?
Take another breath. Because it's a lot. It's a lot to do all that. So just take a breath definitely helps.
Wonderful. Thank you.